It happened where I felt most safe. I'm telling this story as me and my little sister often listen to readings of Let's Not Meet post on YouTube, and I felt like sharing something I'm happy I survived many years ago. It was the early 2000s and I was 14 years old. In my country of Norway, there's not really any gated communities. It's a small, wealthy country, and the crime rate is very low. Even so, me and my family lived in sort of a gated community. It was located on the top of a hill, surrounded by large areas of forest. There were barriers on all sides, making it impossible to reach the inside of the community by a car, unless you had a key to one of the barriers. There was only one car road connecting the community to the outside world. My mom used to tell me it reminded her of this book she read when she was younger, about a village on the top of a mountain where everyone died after the only road reaching the village was blocked after a storm. But mostly everyone felt completely safe in this place. One night, I was heading to my friend Tamar's house to watch a movie. She lived on the other side of the neighborhood, by the edge of the forest, but it just took a couple minutes walking, and since everyone felt so safe inside the gated community, my parents would let me visit my friends quite late on the weekends. It was a fall night and completely dark. There were absolutely no one outside. The only thing I could hear were my own footsteps on the pavement road. I walked past a couple of rows of houses and a little park and came to a football field. The lights on the football field were closed for the night, so it was pitch black all around. But crossing it was the quickest way to get to my friend. I opened my cell phone for lights and kept walking on my road. When I reached the middle of the football field, something happened that made my heart jump. On the other end of the field, inside a small forest patch, a bright light lit up. I turned my head and found a car spotlight pointed right at me. I freaked out, but had no choice but to continue walking as I was in the middle of the field. The car kind of stood there as if someone inside was inspecting me from afar. Something about it felt really wrong. The whole area inside the community was a no-car zone, and there would hardly ever be a car inside. You would have to go through a lot of trouble to get a car all the way inside to the football field. Whoever was inside clearly had a reason for hiding their car inside the forest with full view of the entire field. Almost as if they were waiting for someone to pass by in the nighttime. Then the car started moving. Now, from the corner of my eye, I saw it slowly creeping out from behind the forest towards me, as if I wouldn't notice it if it came closer. That's when I started running. Whoever was inside hit the gas, and the car that was previously creeping up on me was now coming right at me with top speed. Being a fast runner, I managed to pass the rest of the football field and get onto a small side road where the car couldn't go full speed. The car caught up to me in seconds and turned onto the small side road with a turn so sharp it almost crashed. Whoever was inside really wanted to get to me. There were no houses nearby, only trees on each side of the road. I kept running in the darkness on this small road, only thinking that if I screamed, no one would even hear me. I had to do something, or whoever was in this car would get a hold of me. At the rate that this car was going, it was gonna get to me eventually. My only advantage, and I'm sure what saved my life, was that I knew this area like the back of my hand. There was a very narrow path, way too narrow for a car to go by, going uphill between the trees on the left side of the road. Just a couple of meters ahead, I turned left and ran up the narrow path. I prayed the car would keep going and lose me. It didn't. The car stopped with a scream from the tires. By now, I was running up, sheer adrenaline powered by my fear for whoever was behind me. I was worried the muscles in my thighs would rip open, but I had to keep going. There was no choice. I managed to turn my head slightly while running and saw two men with knives in their hands coming out of the car. My heart dropped. Someone yelled, "Get her!" It was too dark to see their faces. I actually think they might have worn balaclavas, because I could see their jeans and leather jackets, and they wore something like an ice cap, but no faces in the dark. One thing was certain though, these were big guys. Their voices gave them away as being grown-ass men. They had to have been between their mid-20s to mid-30s. I didn't have the time or energy to turn my head again, but I was sure for the first time I looked that there was also someone left in the car. That could be only one thing. The men running behind me were planning on bringing me back to the car, and that last person... Oh my god! My head kept screaming. Someone is actually trying to friggin' kidnap me. If these guys get to me, I'll never see the sun again, I thought to myself. It was honestly the most horrific hour of my life. Just minutes ago, I'd been walking to my friends on a normal weekend night, and now I was running for my life with these monsters with knives behind me. I sprinted towards the first house I saw after getting out of the forest patch. I managed to get to the door of the house, which was open by some miracle. I ran inside and locked the door. I slid down on the floor, catching my breath and asking myself what the hell just happened. I kept looking outside, but didn't see anyone. My friend's house was just 2 houses down from the one I was inside. I was so scared. Whoever lived in this house would freak out when they saw me and throw me out, where those guys might still be waiting. In a moment of sheer and stupid panic, I opened the door, rang the doorbell to the house as hard as I could, so whoever lived there would come to their door, and sprinted as fast as I could to my friend's house in tears. By the time I managed to catch my breath, explained to people what had happened, and got my dad to come pick me up, there were no one to be found in the whole community. No car, no people, no nothing. The only thing they left behind was the mark on the road where the car had turned so fast it almost crashed earlier. The mark on the road stayed for weeks. I still get shivers when I pass that spot now, over 10 years later. Why were these people after me? They couldn't possibly have known a teenage girl was gonna casually pass by the football field that late at night. My family didn't have any enemies. They were pretty much ever in each other's company. We didn't have any money trouble, or too much money for that matter either. My only guess is they're gonna do something to someone at random. Or maybe I look like someone else they were after. I don't know. Anyways, I never saw their faces or knew who they were. The creepiest thing, though, is the only way they would have gone into that place is if they were residents of the community and had a key to the barriers. I might have seen them again and again without knowing. Selling my dresser got creepy. So, 3 days ago, I put my dresser for sale on Facebook. I belong to a lot of those buy, sell, and trade groups that are local to us. I've never really had any issues with creeps before, and I've sold a lot of stuff on these groups before. I don't drive, so I have people come to my house. Not the best situation, but I have a large dog, a scary husband, and 2 security cameras. So this dresser honestly was nothing special, just a dresser with a mirror and great condition, but I wanted it gone because I want to put 2 bookshelves in my room for increased storage. I listed it with photos, and for some reason, this post got popular. I'm talking 55 messages overnight. It was a first come, first served situation, and I got a message from a guy that went like this. "It's mine. Give me your address, I'll be there at 1. This was without any prior conversation with me, and I didn't answer it because I had an elderly retired nice couple coming at noon to check it out and maybe buy it, so I did not reply. About 30 minutes later, I get, "Hey bitch, I'm coming at 1, give me your address or I'll look it up." My creep meter starts going off, and I tell hubby he isn't concerned at all, and at noon, the elderly couple comes and buys the dresser and all is good. The guy didn't show up at 1, so I marked the dresser sold, and I thought that was the end of it. I've got cash, room for bookshelves, and all's good. Until today at 1 p.m., when there's a hard knocking on my door. My dog goes apeshit. I'm not expecting anyone. Thank God hubby is home, because there's some hard knocking on the door, and I'm generally a nervous person with answering the door, honestly, as I've gotten pretty gnarly anxiety. Hubby gets the door, and it's some guy demanding his dresser. Hubby tells him that we sold the dresser yesterday, and that he was sorry, but he'd have to leave. The guy says he looked up my information online, and I had promised him the dresser. At this point, I get nervous, and it might have been some premature of me, but I call the cops. Thankfully, hubby got the door shut and locked, and the guy didn't stick around any longer. We did have his picture on our cameras, which we are keeping, because the police told us to be careful and keep things locked for a few days. But how friggin' creepy do you have to be? I also don't know where he found my information, as I've been scouring the internet and find nothing. It's a little scary to know he got my address from somewhere, and I don't even know where. Scary cable guy. Long-time lurker, first-time poster, and all that stuff. Please delete or let me know if I'm missing anything as far as the rules go. This happened a few years back, when my husband and I lived in a townhouse that's part of a relatively large apartment complex. We've been having issues on and off with our cable service. Now, it wasn't uncommon for us to randomly lose cable access on a TV here or there, or be unable to watch premium channels like HBO or Showtime, despite the fact that those channels were part of the package we were paying for. As a result, my husband would call the cable company somewhat regularly, and they'd have to schedule time for a technician to take a look. Generally speaking, whenever my husband would schedule a technical call, he tried to do it for a time frame when he knew he'd be home. On the rare occasion that wasn't possible due to his work schedule, he'd always let me know that the tech was going to be at our home, and he'd give me the time frame when I can expect them. Additionally, we get a confirmation call from the cable company reminding us of our apartment, asking us to verify someone would be home. Now, on this particular day, a Saturday or a Sunday, my husband left to go to work. I was home alone, and it was just a normal day. About 15 minutes after my husband left the house, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole, but didn't see anyone. "Who is it?" I yelled, and heard the muffled response. "It's the tech." Confused, because my husband hadn't said anything about someone coming out to look at anything, and because I wasn't aware of any issues we've been having with our service lately, I opened the door. I wasn't scared at this time. I mean, it was daylight, and it really seemed like no big of a deal. There was a man standing on my front porch. He looked to be in his mid-20s and was of average height and build. He seemed shifty. Initially, it looked to me like he had to pee and was doing the pee-pee dance, kind of hopping a little from one leg to the other. "Can I help you?" I asked. "I was called out to check a few things with your cable box. It sounds like you're having problems with your service. I checked the lines outside and everything looked good. I need to look at a few things inside," he replied. Immediately confused, I peered past him as he stood at my door. Now, I knew our cable was currently working just fine, as we'd had a service call only a few days before. We hadn't had any problems since then. I realized there was no official van parked anywhere, something all the technicians which had come here before had driven during those past service calls. I also noticed that he had nothing in his hands. No clipboard, paperwork, no nothing. I knew from prior visits that there was always a work order that I need to sign whenever a technician paid a visit. The man was wearing street clothes, a long-sleeved plaid shirt, jeans, work boots, and one of those fluorescent vests you can buy at Walmart that the guys who do construction on the highways wear. I became a little nervous at this point. At best, I thought maybe he was legitimate, but just had the wrong home. I had a feeling that something just wasn't right with the situation, however. I told him that he must be mistaken, and we had not made any service calls, and started to close the door. Before I could get it all the way closed, he stuck his foot in the doorway and insisted no mistake had been made. Getting scared, I told him I did not want him coming in the house, and reiterated that we did not report any issues with our cable service. Keeping his foot in the door, the man begins to plead with me to let him inside. He tells me he's a new technician with the company, and that it's important he fulfill all service requests, or that he may get fired. He stated it's possible that there had been a mix-up, and that we hadn't called anyone for assistance, but that because he had been scheduled to come out, he was still required to look around and verify that everything was in working order. He told me if I could just let him in, he'd call the office and straighten everything out. Very uncomfortable now. I started trying to think of a way to get this guy's foot out of my doorway. I was about to shove him in the chest, hoping to make him lose his balance so I could slam and lock the door, when my neighbor arrived next door. Our townhouses were side by side, and we essentially shared the front porch. As she walked up to her door, I loudly said, so that she could hear me, and I realized I was in trouble, that I did not want him at my home, that I had made no service request, and I was not okay with him forcing me to keep talking to him, and that I called the police if he did not leave immediately. My neighbor, understanding the situation, immediately stopped what she was doing and stood on her porch next to the man, cell phone in hand. She was ready to call 911. Realizing he was causing problems, and that now there was a witness to the exchange, the man simply turned around and walked away, saying nothing. I quickly thanked my neighbor for her help and closed the door, locking it. I called my husband and confirmed that I was right. I already knew what to be true. He had not called the cable company for anything at all, hoping I was just being paranoid. I called the cable company and asked if they'd send a technician to my home. Accidents can happen, right? They told me they hadn't sent anyone. I then asked if they'd sent anyone to my apartment complex, hoping that maybe the guy had just the wrong address. The company insisted they did not. The incident made me nervous, but there hadn't been any harm done, right? And because it had happened in the middle of the day, I was able to put it out of my mind pretty quickly. It was a very strange thing to have happened, but after the guy left, I just told myself he had probably made an honest mistake, somehow, and that I'd just been overly cautious. I forgot about it. A couple of nights later, I was watching the news on mute, while cooking dinner, glancing at the TV, absentmindedly. I was horrified to see the mugshot of the guy who had been at my doorstep just a few days prior. I quickly turned the sound on. It turns out the man had just been hired as a contractor with a company that partners with a cable company. He had done a service call at a woman's house, returning to her home late the next day, breaking in. She was chatting with her boyfriend when the incident occurred, and whatever it was he heard while they were on the phone made him call the police to request an officer to go check on her. When police arrived, they found the woman bound and gagged. She had been sexually assaulted. The man fled, jumping off the balcony towards the rear of the complex when police arrived. They showed up mid-assault. 2 hours later, he was apprehended. At the time of the broadcast, he was being held $500,000 bond. I was almost hysterical, obviously seeing this on TV. I told my husband, of course, and mentioned the incident to a few close friends. I called the police as well, but actually I didn't hear back from them after having left a message. I assumed they didn't need to speak to me after having already caught the guy, right? He was ultimately convicted. At some point, the victim filed a lawsuit against the cable company, and the company he gets its contractors from. It seems the man had a criminal record that no one bothered to check prior to hiring him. I have no way of knowing what he planned on doing when he showed up at my place that day, nor do I ever want to know. Hopefully, Scary Cable Guy and I will never meet again.